In the first two videos of this series, we look firstly at the Georgian era and then the Victorian era. This video is about Victoria's eldest son and second child, Edward VII. We're going to look at the Edwardian era. Now I know Speke Hall isn't Edwardian, it's actually Tudor, but it has an external timber frame which is both structural and decorative, and this black and white facade is brought back in the Victorian era. The late Victorians liked this style of building, and it carried over into the Edwardian time as well. People say that it's a really bad idea to put wood on the outside of a building because, well, it'll rot and your house will fall down. But building on this house started 495 years ago, so perhaps it's not such a bad idea after all. Liverpool Waterfront on a very lovely August morning, and these docks were originally built in the Victorian times, and this is the Albert Dock, Victoria's husband. But some buildings, although built in the Victorian times, look distinctly Georgian. So there is some crossover here and there, that buildings that were popular in one era are either revived or still built in the next era. On Liverpool Waterfront there is a statue of Edward VII, and we'll take a wander over to have a look at it. But Edward VII was King of the United Kingdom, the British Dominions and the Empire of India from the 22nd of January 1901, which is when his mother Queen Victoria died, until his death in 1910, which makes him 68 when he died, which is pretty young really. I mean, I know 68-year-olds who are still running around Liverpool Waterfront with a video camera making videos for YouTube. Now, as we head off to have a look at King Edward VII's statue, the backdrop will be the Three Graces. The Port of Liverpool building and the Liver building were both built during Edward's reign. The Cunard building was built during his son's reign, and that was George V. This is the statue that I've walked over to show you, and this is King Edward VII. The statue of Edward VII is by a Welsh sculptor by the name of Sir William Gascoigne John, and it dates from 1916. There was some restoration work carried out in 2008, and it's a bronze statue on a granite pedestal. Apparently it was intended to stand on a podium at the south end of St George's Hall. No idea why it ended up at the Pierhead. Now, Edward's nickname was Bertie. Princess Park and Princess Road, Princess Avenue are named after Edward, who was prince when they were built. First of all, we've got to sack the continuity department. Different day, different t-shirt. Anyway, at least it's the same. At least it's the same make, Jack and Jones. They're sponsoring this video. We're going to take a trip to North Liverpool to some derelict tenements which are just off Vauxhall Road. Now it's walkable from city centre. If you head towards Hatton Garden and head out on Vauxhall Road, it's not that far. I got the bus, 2 stops. Anyway, these are very important, although they are derelict now, and have been derelict for a long, long time. So long that the residents who live around the old building are pretty much fed up with it. But they are important, and I'll explain why. Now, these tenements played a very important part in Liverpool's history. They are the first example of council flats outside of London. They were originally constructed as part of a labourer's village, and it was officially opened by the Countess of Derby in 1912. Now, 1912 is 2 years after the Edwardian era, but they would have been designed during Edward's reign, and they have the timber frame facade that I mentioned earlier in the video when we went to see Speke Hall. Believe it or believe it not, these are actually Grade 2 listed buildings. They were once home to a very tight-knit community of families. People actually loved living here. In later years, it was used as student accommodation. I mean, what isn't in Liverpool these days? It's actually been left derelict for decades. At some point in its time, and I don't think it's that long ago, I think it's around about the late 90s, early 2000s possibly, it was going to be restored and converted into a state-of-the-art residential complex. It was going to be surrounded by 5 blocks of new 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and some New York-style 3-bedroom duplex penthouses. For some reason, work on that came to a standstill, and as you can see, it's still pretty derelict today. Now, these tenements were once called the finest in the city, and they actually sort of paved the way for what would be 1930s social housing, which were the concrete gardens that were erected in Liverpool at that time. And people loved living in those as well. So I just thought I'd put a couple of photographs on, or maybe just one, of what Eldon Grove used to look like in its heyday. Next, we are going to have a look at a house which is owned by Gavin and Chris. My wife and I met Gavin and Chris when we were filming at Sudley House earlier in the year, and we were invited over for tea and homemade scones, or homemade scones as Gavin calls them. Anyway, they were excellent. So this is Eggbirth in Liverpool, and I'm not quite sure whether these are Victorian or Edwardian. I did a little Google and it came up as Victorian, but it's the style of the house with the external wooden facade, and it's a really beautiful house. They're having quite a lot of work done at the moment to get it to the way they want it, but the view out the window is excellent. Lovely fireplace. The detail in the windows, which you wouldn't get now, they'd just be stickers. And the size and width of that hall is amazing. The detail in the glass. During the Edwardian era, there were also a lot of terrace houses built. Unlike the Victorian versions, these terrace houses were built on a larger plot, so you had more space inside, larger rooms. The more fashionable ones were built out of red brick, but the fashion was to give them all a bay window. Now, these are just off Smithdown Road, and I think these were houses that you could buy for £1 as long as you renovated them, and they all seem to have bought the same colour paint. When some historians talk about the Edwardian era, they extend the time period, and instead of it being 1901 to 1910, they extend it to 1919. The Edwardian era is seen as a time of elegance, which can be seen in ships like the Titanic, which were extravagant. But the Edwardian era also brought some technology into people's lives, and I just wanted to go through some of the inventions that were made during this period. So during this period, there was the invention of early flight, the Wright brothers and their aeroplane. There was also early motorised transport. The Ford Model T was brought out and was very popular. There was also electricity, which was supplied to people's homes for the first time. The only problem with that was none of the wires were shielded as they are today, and it was just bare wires. So obviously some houses caught fire, and there was also the invention of electronic gadgets like electric steam irons, and they would be plugged into the light socket. So obviously it's going to overload the lighting system, so more fires. I suppose you've got to try these things, and they go wrong and you fix them, and eventually you get to where we are today. But there were some other things as well. Asbestos was invented, and they thought it was a wonderful thing. So they started making all kinds of things out of asbestos, including clothes. And as we know today, asbestos the spores from asbestos can get into your lungs and kill you. But back then, they thought it was amazing. Now, one last thing was the discovery of radium by Marie and Pierre Curie, and all kinds of uses were thought of to sell radium in household goods. It was in soap, it was in condoms. They even used it on watches so that your watch numerals would glow in the dark, so you could see what time it was without turning the light on and setting fire to your house because you've turned the lights on. But they used it in all kinds of things, and as we know today, it's not very good for you, radium. You really shouldn't use a condom that's made from radium or has radium anywhere near it. One final thing is that I think the general public seemed to like Edward the Seventh as a king. He seemed to be quite popular, and he died in 1910. His son took over as king, George V. So we're back to the Georges again. But as I said, some historians extend it through his reign as well as a Edwardian era rather than going back to Georgian Era Mark II. During George's reign, World War One happened, and obviously we go to war, to World War. Basically, we're going to war with Germany, and for some strange reason, the Germans weren't very popular at that time in this country. So we are in the house, or within the time period of the House of Saxe-Gotha and Coburg, which is German, and the royal family realised this, that German wasn't very popular at the moment. So that's when they changed their name, and they changed their house, their name, from Saxe-Gotha Coburg to something a little bit more English, and they had a think about it and decided to name themselves after their favourite castle, and that was Windsor, and that's where the name Windsor comes from, which continues through our royal family. So just an interesting period in our time, I guess. Right, that's the Edwardian era done. The next and final video in this little series, I'm going to lump everything together and just call it the modern era, and go through some of the fashions in buildings and how we lived up until now. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and catch up soon.